Good afternoon. Welcome back to the business end. Today we've got someone who's lived both worlds we love talking about, sport and business. Tony Dalwood is a double Cambridge Blue who played for Saracens, Rosslyn Park and the Irish Exiles, in addition to caps at junior England international level. As a rugby player, he was a fantastic fullback, often a calming influence on the team, and someone who was always prepared to strike when the opportunity arose. He was often referred to as a large fullback, standing at 6'4". But in the city, he's made an even more extraordinary impact. When Tony took over Gresham House through a management buy-in in 2014, it was an older firm that most people had written off. Founded in 1857, but for several years had been in liquidation. Gresham House is now a specialist investment business focusing on delivering financial returns to their clients by investing in the global themes shaping our future, such as forests, renewable energy, housing and growth companies. Under Tony's leadership, it's grown more than 30 times bigger. That's a business equivalent of taking a club stuck at the bottom of the leagues, rebuilding it and turning it into a Premiership champion. He didn't stop there. He sold it on to a US private equity team in December 2023. Tony is still the CEO of Gresham House, driving growth, where it's now a global leader in asset classes such as forestry and battery energy storage. Its total assets under management stands at over a whopping 10 billion. And if that wasn't enough, Tony is a regular voice in the business media. You'll see him on Sky, CNBC, Bloomberg, and he's often quoted in the FT, talking about markets, sustainability and investment. Tony, it's brilliant to have you on the show.
Great to be here. Thanks, Liam.
Welcome, Tony.
And thanks you, Fitz.
As we know in rugby, no one wins alone. As with all team sports, we learned that you're only as strong as the team around you. When you walked into Gresham House in 2014, you brought a management team with you. That's exactly what the great Willie Anderson told us about good directors of rugby, the CEO equivalent in business. They bring trusted lieutenants from the outset who they know and trust and who won't crack under pressure. That makes delegation easier. Tony, how did your sporting experience shape your views on bringing a management team in from the outset at Gresham House?
Well, chaps, it's great to be here, and thank you very much for the invitation. Always when you're going out there to set a goal, you need a vision and ambition, and that needs absolute clarity. You need people around you that are risk takers in order to then execute that, because nothing is easy that's worthwhile. Those people around you go by a mantra in my mind of they need to make a difference. But on top of that, you need a foundation of pillars. They need to have people that you are utterly trustworthy and within the team, that they have a proven capability of winners, i.e. people that know what winning looks like. And importantly, they need to provide energy around everything they do, whether they're in meetings or outside of meetings. The ability to create an energetic environment is really important. All of those things actually come within a sporting culture. You know, they need to recognize that winning, training, practicing, but then finally celebrating together, something that rugby does extremely well. Arguably in the old days, you used to say too well. All of those are skills that come together into what I believe are the foundation of a winning team. And of course, they are multiple skills. And recently that phrase has come in diversity. They are diversity of skills. And that contributes to the pillars of a winning team. And I found that winning is the most enjoyable thing.
100%.
Yeah, so let's talk about discipline and process. At Cambridge, we played some great rugby, but we still had to make the starter plays, make the tackles, do the basics. Dr. Stephen McIver, a sports psychologist, says success comes from controlling the controllables, sticking to the process. At Gresham House, you didn't chase market noise, you drilled into fundamentals, investment, discipline and client trust. How much of your success came from sticking to the basics? And how can business leaders make sure they stay focused on process and not distractions?
Yeah, it's an important point. The foundations, the pillars I talked about, they are core basic skills. You need to be the best you can at those basics, because they are effectively the commodities that everybody's going to have. Where you're going to add value is above the basics. Practicing the basics, if you take sport, whether it's speed, skills, stamina, lots of this is in your control to be slightly better at a certain level in order to be the basics within whatever game it is you're playing. But ultimately, when it comes to work, you need to have the basics in place. If you're working in the city or financial, you need to understand numbers, business plans, the ability to communicate, the ability to learn quickly, and actually the ability to copy best practice and move on quicker and beyond that. There's a number of basics there that fit with sport as well as business. And in order to, if I was advice to people listening and getting into the financial or in just business in general, learn basics, learn what the basics are for whatever it is you want to achieve. When we were playing rugby, we had to be certainly mentally tough, but the basics of speed, the ability to pass, the ability to move from one place to another, and the ability to scrummage, in your guys' instance, the ability to catch a ball in my instance. But those basics were taken as read, but you had to practice and practice, have those basics, and then move on. When it comes and then further into the business world process, wrapping certain amount of process, particularly when you're in a regulatory environment, you've got to have process in order to make sure that you assume certain things are done. At the end of all that, you must give everybody in your organization an element of leash in order to take risks. You want them to make a difference. You don't want them to come in 9 to 5 and just leave at the end of the day as though it's a commodity thing. If you can give them some energy and ambition, that will then produce something above the line, which hopefully will take you into a special environment of winning.
And being the CEO of a big company, Tony, how do you stay focused and deal with distractions that probably not relevant to running a business? I mean, what would be your tips to anyone listening to that?
Just keep reminding yourself of what the goal and success looks like, because you're always going to get knocked off the path. And what you need to remember is to get back on that path and winning, because it's not easy. Doing something that's worthwhile is not easy. It requires an extra effort and sometimes more than a little bit of effort. So when you get knocked off that path, which you will, remind yourself what success is going to be and what it can be in order to get back on that path, work hard and go forward again. It's reminding of what success looks like all the time.
Yeah, I think it's good as well. If you've got a trusted team as well as the CEO around you, the delegation is a bit easier if you know that those guys are not 100% with you and not going to crack under pressure and they're going to follow the process, which is something we discussed as well, which makes it a bit easier as a CEO to control distractions that are going on around you that might make it harder to run the business.
Yeah, there's no question. If you're used to the people around you and what the ups and downs provide from those people, so you don't have to dance on eggshells, think about, I better not say that in case I upset them. If you can all say what makes something serious in a way that perhaps won't offend them, or indeed you can laugh about things in a way that people will laugh together, you can then carry on, work normally, get the best out of every individual around that. And then the phrase that some often uses, the team is worth more than the sum of the parts. And that is an important point, because we'll talk maybe later about some of the coaching aspects, but there are people that can bring together a team and make them worth more than the sum of the parts, and that is what a good coach can do.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw an interesting article about that the other day, Tony. Someone was going on about this person's, like seen as like the top biller and but doesn't actually produce, and there's a bombardment of comments about, get rid. But then I made a comment which just said sometimes people just help winners win, and they're like the gel, and that's like going back to your point about the sum of parts, basically. I think.
Yeah, and maybe it's me personally, but I'm very keen on sharing winning. Right,
Yeah.
it is a team game, and hopefully I'll make the point whenever there is a clear win that we've had, whether it's in business or elsewhere, you'll see me talking about other individuals, or the fact that there's been a unit that's worked well, not a single individual.
Yeah.
Let's talk about resilience. Time and time again in sport, we hear the hardest knocks build resilience. Tony, you walked into a 150-year-old company that had been written off with little assets under management. There must have been moments when the pressure was brutal, critics, markets, even some self-doubt. Where did rugby resilience show up in your business, and what can leaders learn about taking the hits and staying in the fight?
When I look back at my rugby career, the things that led to success required obsession. needed to be obsessed with whatever it was. When I was at Cambridge, and we talk about when I first met Liam, I had to be obsessed with getting a blue and playing in the Oxford and Cambridge varsity match at Twickenham. That was necessary for me in order to achieve that goal. I then had to be obsessed with getting into the right career, and I became obsessed with that. And so I use that word obsession, and it isn't an over exaggeration, because you're competing in a very, very competitive world. There are a lot of very, very good male and female people out there who are simply very, very good and want it as well. And there's not enough in the supply and demand of this world of these good jobs in order to go around. So you have to be the best you can and excel. So I would say obsession is important. But beyond that and behind that, you need things like family support, because if you're going to become obsessed, you're going to have to compromise. You have to compromise on family time, if that's what's necessary, or sports time. But that is an important part, stability within the background of your life in order to compromise and become obsessed. Of course, there are other areas that you also are important, that may be important. For my case was I was coaching junior rugby for children, or there was elements of working on charity boards that I was doing. So there's one or two things where I didn't compromise, but you could section them out, and then allowed you to then be obsessed with, in my case, business, or prior to that, rugby. But things are never in a straight line. All right, you might become obsessed, you might believe that you can be resilient, but then suddenly something comes from left field. And in rugby, that could often be injury. Just walking on the pitch to train is dangerous, and you've got 20 stone people just sitting there thinking, right, I want to get your position, or I want to make my mark to get in the team for the weekend. It's dangerous. And it's another example for me. I ended up where in my 2 years at Cambridge, I had an ACL, or an anterior cruciate ligament damage, and that's quite a nasty thing. And it particularly somebody that was trying to run fast, it wasn't easy. So I ended up having to become obsessed to get fit. And fortunately, I had a very good physio or a surgeon. And actually, I look back now, you reminded me as this is coming up. He was one of the leaders, a guy called David Dandy. He was one of the leaders in ACL reparation. And I became obsessed to get fit, and I worked in the summer, whilst I was doing internship in the city at Swiss Bank. And I was working in the evening, and in terms of getting fit, and in the morning before going to work in this internship. And I got fit again to play within 4.5 months, which in his terminology was unbelievable. And he sent me a letter, because he did things like, I remember waking up next to, I think, Alan Shearer, or one of those people in the operating theatre. And and he, so he was doing top level reparations. And he sent me a letter saying, an amazing achievement because of how fast you got fit again, to then play again that following season in the Blues matches. And so I keep those things, because they do tell you that if you really want something, you do compromise, but you can achieve it.
I totally agree, and famous old saying I'm fond of, the body follows where the mind leads. In terms of you wanted to heal quicker, you had that obsession, that passion, that mindset to achieve your goals, whether it was healing from your knee or getting into the team on the weekend, getting your blue, etc., etc. Would you mind sort of breaking down? So within it, do you have a process that you utilize in terms of setting that vision to achieve, to channel that obsession, that passion, to get to your goal?
Yeah, so I do. I think about, and I tell this to my children, routines, because what you start up with the goal, you agree whatever that is. It could be exams, grades. It could be a sporting achievement. It could be a career achievement. But let's, start there, and then agree that and work backwards. Okay, if you want to achieve an A at studying, work backwards. Oh, you've got to do this and this, and you can't do that. Okay, work again backwards. Okay, that means I've got to do this. This slot of time for this, and this slot of time for that, and who else do you need involved? I need to get some tutors involved, or practice involved. Okay, work backwards further. So you end up with building blocks that take you to there. And so when I talk at Gresham House, so often the guys sort of listen to me going, right, let's start at the end. So what does it look like? Now let's work backwards from there. And that's the same, I think, in any goals and ambitions. Start at the end, work out, visualize it, then work backwards. And I often finally I say, when you go to sleep, visualize that success. Visualize bowling a ball and taking the middle stump out. Visualize, putting the conversion over, whatever it may be, and that helps remember what success looks like.
That's great advice. Start with the end in mind, and all things. I mean, me and Liam talk about.
He was going to.
Oh, gold. Me and Liam talk about this all the time. Stephen Coveney, 7 Habits of Successful People. Start with the end in mind. And I think the other thing you touched upon there, visualization. All things are created twice. If you can't see it in your mind's eye, then you're not going to make it happen. You've got to picture it first.
Yeah. And there's another point there as well, which I talk about and bore Fitzy to death with, Tony, which is like, never worry about the bits and pieces which make up the performance. Which is another important point because it helps alleviate pressure from the employees. But moving on to trust and delegation now. In rugby, directors of rugby have specialised coaching covering various parts of the game, such as defence and attack coaches. Leadership is about giving responsibility to others and backing them. At Gresham House, you have £1 billion decisions happening in committees. You couldn't be across every detail. So how do you build a culture of trust and accountability in your team? And what advice would you give leaders who struggle to let it go?
So there's a number of components, but I think overarching, you never stop learning and keep people learning. So they read and they listen and they learn. And then you bring that into the workplace, and to develop that trust is communication. So if you can communicate, relax when you communicate, socialize and relax when you communicate, over time, you will build that trust. It's never something that immediately happens, but you can do that through community. Ultimately, at the core of it is communication and socializing. I think recognize also that the individual strengths and weaknesses can lie in your team. Don't encourage them that they can make mistakes, but make sure that they know that they can't do that mistake twice. And listen more than speaking, particularly in the C-suite roles. You need to be able to listen, take in, and over time you'll know the people that are good at certain comments and where their strengths lie, and you'll obviously spend more time listening to them and utilizing their guidance in any conclusion. So your value add as a chief exec or a C-suite member is to listen to as many angles as possible and then choose what you think should be considered in the final recommendation. And that's where I think people often forget that listening is secondary, but actually it's primary.
Yeah, and I think as well, building like, Tony Underwood, who I think you played with him in '93, isn't it, in a varsity match, speaks about winning trust of teams, and he talks about a 3-minute rule when, he was a pilot on a commercial plane. And he said it's all about small gestures rather than big things sometimes, about how are you doing today, and showing that you care as a leader. That's how you win trust. He talks about that a lot.
Yeah, he's a very capable individual. He's part of my college social society as well, which often these days we don't talk enough about, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about patience. Every rugby season needs patience. You don't win a championship in the first game. In business, that's even harder when markets demand instant results. You played the long game at Gresham House for over a decade. How did sport teach you patience, and what can leaders learn about holding their nerve and playing the long game?
This is a really, really tough point. It's one of the hardest characteristics in life. And when you're in the office, you've got people who are superior to you in certain skills and less or inferior, let's say, in certain skills. So the ability to manage that and be patient is a really, really hard characteristic. And I think often outside of the office, that impatience then takes its direction in another way, because you have to release that frustration sometimes that you have to control when you're in a work environment. And you have to recognize that it is such a hard characteristic, but the best results do come from being patient. They come from being practice, refinements, practice, learning, practice, improving, and that takes time. And that patience ultimately is a real skill. and it's something that needs to be applauded. I mean, the best coaches, the best managers, the CEOs in the world will have patience in some area of their lives, and that is something that we really need to remember. We can always improve on these things. I suppose the final thing is if you explain to people to keep aspiring, that will give them some patience, because they'll get frustrated, remind them what success looks like, and then they'll have patience to go again.
Yeah, and I think it also comes back to the point you made for Liam there about listening. You know, understanding, listening to the people around you, so you can have patience and guiding and understanding of what they can contribute to the team.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Now, Tony, we always finish off with some quick fire questions. These are not long answers, just the first thing that comes to your mind. And yeah, are you ready?
For you, Liam, I'm ready.
Okay, great. Glad to hear it. Glad to hear it. So, who's the best coach you've ever played under, and why?
Right. Apart from my mum and dad, who've been the best coaches of my life, I've had
Good point.
lots of great ones. John Davis, Mark Evans, Tony Rogers. But I'm going to say Bob Reeves. Bob Reeves, the Bristol University of England students coach. He took the sum of the parts and regularly made them outperform. And the data will show that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he was a good guy. And what's the one rugby value you use every day in business?
Play hard. Don't leave anything in the locker.
Excellent answer. And if you had to describe your leadership style in one word?
Joyous. No, seriously. Lead from the front. So that's 3 words.
Actually, I'm gonna throw something in here. And how would others describe your leadership in one word at Gresham House?
Dynamic or tough.
Great. Okay. And what's the biggest critical incident in your career, rugby or business, that shaped you the most?
I think being introduced to the Gresham House opportunity was given to me by part of the network back in the day, 10, 12 years ago. And we took that, the power of that network allowed us, sport and business, to then take Gresham, as you said earlier, that was on a declining liquidation path. And we've now turned it into one of the global positions in forestry, natural capital, energy storage, renewables. So, you know, the greatest critical incident was the network providing me that opportunity.
Excellent. And I probably know the answer to this. Champagne rugby or percentage rugby, which one wins in business?
Okay, well, in business, you've got to go with percentage, but you've always got to look for your edge to take that percentage off the efficient frontier. So to take yourself off the percentages by your edge.
Okay, now you have to be very careful with the answer to the next question. What's harder, catching a high ball with a pack of forwards trying to smash into you, or steering a £470 million deal?
Yeah, the high ball's easy, Liam. Very easy.
It depends who's chasing you, really, I suppose. Yeah. And why is rugby so special to you?
It's a combination of so much, from physicality, where all of us just love the physicality of it, the total toughness of it, combined with the intellect that you can bring to it. You can start moving the tactics. And then finally, of course, after matches, after training, we all know the social is unbelievable. It was just awesome. And that's what then created a mammoth network of just this underlying, we just look at each other, we know.
Yeah. And it's a network that never goes away, and perhaps something that the rugby community needs to build on a bit more, I think, as well. So if you could give one bit of advice to a sports professional coming to the end of their career and looking to pivot into a finance career, what would it be?
Use your network and show real interest in what you're trying to do. Yeah,
absolutely.
Brilliant. That's Tony Dalwood, Cambridge Blue, a man who rebuilt Gresham House from the ground up and still a competitor at heart. Tony, thank you for joining us at the business end.
I've enjoyed it.
Tony.
It's been great. Lovely to see you guys, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, Tony.
All the best.